Welcome to the Timberlake Christian School podcast. Timberlake Christian School, founded in 1966, is a ministry of Timberlake Baptist Church. Our vision is to be a discipleship and educational institution for young people in order to develop them in a passion for glorifying God and train them for a life consistent with a biblical world and life view. For more information, check out our website at timberlakechristianschool.org. Go Tornadoes!
Okay, so this is my privilege. What I've asked Mr. Hunter is for the privilege of starting out the first chapel. And this is really my chance, one, to introduce myself to you, all these new 7th graders coming up that don't know me, other new students in the other grades that don't know me as well. I kind of want to get a chance to introduce myself and share with you a little bit what I do here and what I'm doing. This is not a traditional chapel that you're normally going to have. If you think through this, we're going to have roughly around 17 chapels throughout the entire school year. So it's not that many. And Mr. Hunter will introduce a series that he'll be doing this coming year. And as you walk through the text and just enjoying coming here, and at present when you come here, yes, with the Bible, just a chance to enjoy the Word, worship together, and spend this time together. And so we'll be doing a lot of different things throughout the year in our chapel time. This is my opportunity for me to, one, as Mr. Hunter said, give a charge. I want you to understand a little bit how I see you and your responsibilities here, and how I see my responsibilities here. Now, most of the time, I'll get to know some of you, hopefully not too well, because if I know you too well, it's because you're in my office a lot more than probably you should be, but nevertheless, have a chance to meet a number of you. I do want to say right off the bat that, I've been here, this is my 11th year. So I came here, if you're in 10th grade, you started in kindergarten and you're in 10th grade now. So that's how long I've been here. I came here from the country of France. I've been serving in France I've been a missionary for about 18 years. And after a church plant in France, the church here asked if I'd consider returning. I'd taught here back in the day before I went to France. I taught Bible, I taught French, I coached soccer, I coached basketball, though I didn't know anything about basketball, and coached and helped and drove the bus. But then I went to France and been missionary for 18 years and returned here. I return here because I enjoy not necessarily all the administrative tasks that are before me. What I enjoy doing is looking at your lives and considering it a tremendous privilege to pour into your life, to spend 8 hours a day here with you, hoping to shape your hearts, shape your minds, and give you a solid foundation for your walk in life. This solid foundation is not just going to be academics, though we give you solid academics. When I first came back, my son, John Mark, was 18 years old, moved in mid-year in his senior year, and from there, all my 4 children walked through school here and graduated. One, my son's airplane mechanic for Piedmont, loves what he's doing now, been there 5 years. Other daughter's a software developer for Liberty, loves what she's doing. Another daughter's an accountant, loves what she's doing. So they all walked through here and had a great experience being here and went on from here doing what they wanted to do academically. But the other part that makes this critical is having a spiritual foundation for where you're going to go from here. I look at your life and I want to give you the right tools. I want to shape your mind to understand things, but I want to shape your heart as well to where you can leave here and be successful in life. And be successful means acknowledging God, living in a way pleasing unto Him, and then being fulfilled with the gifts and abilities that He gives to you. I enjoy reading and getting new ideas all the time and being challenged through my reading. I was reading a book recently that was written by 2 18-year-old teenagers, and they're 2 believers. It's not a Bible study book, but they're 2 believers, and they wrote a book that maybe you've heard of it because it was written, I think, back in 2016, but the book is called Do Hard Things. And actually, this is where this word came from. This word, if you look up in the dictionary, you're not going to find it. What's a rebelution? My daughter saw that because I was doing the PowerPoint last night. She goes, Dad, that's not a word. You're right, it's not a word, but we're going to make it a word. And in that book, they introduce the term rebelution, and I want to share that with you a little bit today and what they mean by that, and encouraging you what it means, and kind of going from there. If you take the book, Rebelution, according to these young men, these two men who wrote this book, 18-year-old men who wrote this book, and the reason why they wrote it is they wanted to encourage their peers to do hard things. That's the name of the book, Do Hard Things. And then they use this word, rebelution. They have a website where they have ideas, articles, podcasts. I haven't listened to everything on their website, so I'm not sure if everything I would think is great, but a lot of good things there. They define rebelution this way. Rebelution is a teenage rebellion against low expectations. Let me get my band phone up here to make sure I have a clock. Make sure I see what time we have here. So, they define a rebelution by a teenage rebellion against low expectations. So what does it mean to rebel against something? I mean, that's not usually a term that's necessarily very positive. I'm going to sit here in chapel and say, hey, I want you guys to rebel. That doesn't sound great. Maybe I don't want that. What does it mean? Yes. Well, to go against. Okay. You have something else to that? To go against. What else? What does it mean to rebel? If someone said, hey, I need you to rebel. What's a rebelution? It's to rebel against something. So to oppose, normally when you think about rebelling against something, what do you think about? Rebelling against, sometimes it's authorities, right? Rebelling against power, rebelling against a number of things. In their book, what they're encouraging, this rebelution they're encouraging, is encouraging young people their age is, let's not settle. Let's rebel against the notion of low expectations for teenagers in particular. And they talk a lot about that, and I want to share a few thoughts with you and then give you two things that I'm going to encourage you to rebel against in our time this morning. So yes, it means to rise up against. It means to do things differently, to think differently, to be challenged in a different way, to rebel against a way of doing things, a way of thinking. One thing that is so true to this culture, we live in a culture that expects very little out of you. I want you to think about that for a second. We live in a culture that expects very little out of teenagers. What do you think is expected out of you? I mean, what do you think you're expected to have responsibility for? Anybody? What's expected out of you? I mean, it's good to know, all right, when you come to class. Now, of course, there's classroom expectations. But in generally speaking, what's expected out of you? Anybody? Minimalism. Do the minimum, okay, to get by, hopefully. What else? Yes. Okay, so parents got to have certain expectations of you. Some parents are just hoping you get by. Others have a career expectation that you'll be successful or do certain careers. I looked up a little bit some ideas on what should you expect out of a 15-year-old. So I found this article. I was reading through it. Now listen to this, and then we'll compare this to my challenge for you. So what should you expect out of a 15-year-old? What should he be able to, or she be able to, or he be able to take responsibility for? One, manage money, which means you understand how to spend money, keep an account of money. Maybe you have an account, maybe you have money that you're responsible for. One, you should be able to do laundry and know how to separate the white from the colors and from the how much laundry detergent you use. So if you're 15 years old, that's one of the things you should be able to do is do your laundry and how to separate the laundry correctly. That's a very challenging task, isn't it? Then it says, as a 15-year-old, you should be able to order food. Wow, man, we're getting really deep down into some deep things here. You should be able to order food. Now, I don't know if that means grabbing DoorDash and having your speed dial DoorDash to be able to get food in or order it online, whatever that means. I like this. You should be able to know how to ask for help. I mean, these are a list for 15-year-olds. You should be able to know how to ask for help. You should be able to know how to swallow pills. Wow. We're really digging into we're really asking you to step up to the plate here. Do you know how to swallow a pill and an aspirin if you need one? This is a good one. I don't know if you learned this yet or not. As a 15-year-old, you should be responsible to manage your own hygiene. You should know how to use deodorant and brush your teeth and take a shower without being prompted. That's heavy things there, isn't it? I mean, you're a 15-year-old. We want you to rise up to the occasion. We want you to be serious about life. We want you to be responsible. We want you to do hard things. Just make sure you can manage your hygiene without being prompted. You should be able to stay home alone. And if you're driving, you should know how to drive a car without running out of gas. Now, listen. I've seen adults run out of gas, so I don't know. Maybe that's too much to ask. So the reason why I lay these things out is because it's amazing to me when I look out. I want to encourage you in this way. Yes, I take that title, that book, and what does it mean to do hard things? But I regret. It is disappointing that we live in a culture that expects teenagers to take responsibility for very little. After all, you're not adults. We live in a culture that runs from challenges. We live in a culture that avoids hardship. We live in a culture that fears pain. We live in a culture that dodges duty. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that it was your grandparents' generation, great-grandparents' generation, that went to war at 18 years old. It was your great-grandparents' generation or grandparents' generation that they were lying about their age so they could enlist and they could go to war at 16. At 17. Now we just hope that they could manage their hygiene on their own. We've dumbed down this culture to take teenagers and come to expect very little out of you. If you look back at your history, the word teenager didn't exist until the 1940s. So what was before that? Well, before that, you were either a child or you were an adult. You either were a child that had childish desires and responsibilities, or you were an adult with adult responsibilities. But we didn't have this concept of being a teenager. And today, this concept of a teenager is kind of this no man's land. It's kind of like, well, you're not responsible yet, but you're not a child yet, but you're not really responsible, and so we don't really expect anything out of you. It's kind of like this, just kind of years we just kind of figure things out. Let me tell you, for those of you who know me, first, I want you to know that my office is always open. If you come up and I'm not there, you ask Miss Mears, hey, can I have a chance to talk to Mr. Abbett? She'll say he's going to be back at this time. I'll put it down so he knows you're coming. But if you have any questions, please, my office is open to you. But let me tell you one thing you're going to learn from me is when I talk to you and address you, I address you as a young adult. I don't look down at you and talk down to you as a child. You are, from this 7th to 12th grade, you're a young adult, and I'll talk to you like young adults. So if there's a problem, I'll say, hey, won't you tell me what the problem is? Explain to me what happened. I want to know. You're mature enough to understand. Help me understand what happened. Because I'm going to treat you like a young adult that you are, and have the expectation that you can dialogue with me as a young adult would. You're not going to hear me be condescending. When you hear me address you, even in the hallways here, in the parking lot, I'm going to always address you like a young adult, not like a child. And so when I have you come to my office, we have questions. Hey, let's have these conversations. And it's healthy to have those kind of conversations. It wasn't that long ago, before the teenage years came into place, a girl was considered marriageable at 15. I know, scary. Some of you're not allowed to, date at 15, much less be married at 15, right? But back in the turn of the century, in the 1900s, only 1 out of 10 teenager was in school. So if he wasn't in school, where was he? Where was she? She was working. She was helping the family. She was helping the farm. They were early on in the Industrial Revolution. They were in factories. Only 1 out of 10 teenagers at the turn of the century, 1900, were in school. And at that time, 15 was the acceptable age to start thinking about getting married. If you're a young man, 15 was the acceptable age to go in the military as a cadet and commit your life already to service. Today, at 15, what do we expect out of you? Well, you're not quite ready to get a job yet, maybe. But we just want you to be responsible and not stay up all night with your PlayStation, maybe something like that. But what a contrast. What has changed over such a generation? I've got 3 examples here, and I want you to consider these true historical accounts. But I want you to understand them. Not saying, here's what they were and they were better. Honestly, these 3 accounts are a lot more common back in those days, and of course to us they seem exceptional, but it was more common even back in those days. One is the story of George. George was born in 1732 in Northern Virginia, and by the age of 17, he was an official surveyor for the Culpeper County, Northern Virginia here, where he used his geometry, trigonometry, and surveying skills, and for the next 3 years, he measured previously unmapped territories. At 17 years old, for the next 3 years, he took all his surveying skills, all his math skills, and he was a surveyor and charted unknown lands to map them at 17. David, 1801, born in Knoxville, Tennessee. At 10 years old, he began to serve a career at sea, serving as a naval cadet on the warship Essex. He saw his first battle at the age of 11. At the age of 12, he was given command of a captured ship in order to return it home with his crew at the age of 12. Clara, 1821, born in Oxford, Massachusetts, at the age of 14, served as a nurse in the middle of an epidemic. At the age of 17, she served as a school teacher. So, you're saying these stories are crazy. No, that these stories are more the norm back in those days than it is today. And so the reason why I'm saying these, because we look at teenagers today and think, wow, the culture and society around you expects very little out of you. But I'm going to tell you, you should expect a lot more. And don't settle for low expectations. I don't look out and say, wow, these kids, you're in this waiting room just waiting for life to happen. The problem we have today is that we expect young people, we expect these teenagers to remain childish for so much longer than is necessary. Much of this is done to the detriment of what you could be doing, and certainly what God has called you and made you to do. And perhaps even what you want to do if you get from under these low expectations, meaning, you're being held back. I think one of the illustrations in the book that he uses, I think is pretty helpful. You probably heard how do you keep an elephant contained, right? When the elephant is small, you have a rope around his foot and you tie him to a peg in the ground, and that little young elephant learns that he can't pull that peg and he can't get loose. Well, as the elephant gets big, what happens? Well, of course, the elephant could knock that peg loose and run, but he's so used to being tethered to that peg that he tells himself, I can't go anywhere because I've got this little rope I'm tied to. And these authors, these 2 young teenagers in the book, said that's kind of how our mindset is with teenagers. We have ourselves, we're limited to this peg as a child, and we think we can't expand and do so much more, and you can. I wish I could really convince you to understand that as a young adult, God's given you giftings and abilities and the joy of trying hard things and putting away childish things and embracing so much more responsibility than what society as a whole thinks you're able to do. So as they go on, many people look at teenagers, and I want to tell you, this is not how I see you. That's why I tell you, when I see you, I see the opportunity and the potential that God has placed in you to serve Him fully and greatly and do great things for the Lord. Your teenage years and these high school years is not this nebulous waiting room or you're waiting for life to happen. This is not game time. This is not play time. This is not, where you just hang around and wait for life to happen. I expect you as students in high school, I expect you to excel at whatever you put your hands to. Now, excel does not mean to be perfect. Excel means to do your best at something, to give your full potential in something. I look at you and in the classroom, in the work you provide, in the way you behave, in the way you interact, in the way you talk to each other, in the way you talk to your teachers, in the way you conduct yourself on the court or outside when you're playing a sport. I expect you to behave in a way that's becoming of a believer and a young adult and be responsible and have proper communication one with another. We should have those expectations of you, and you should have those expectations of yourself. This is not playland. This is not waiting. This is not the place where you wait for life to really happen. Many people in high school just can't wait to get out of high school and graduate. And I know senioritis is there every year. The same senior class just can't wait to go to the next phase, as if something's going to happen in the next phase. Actually, things are happening now that are shaping you into who you're going to be. So when I see your life, I'm looking at you. Wow, your heart and your mind is being shaped for the person you're going to become. And I expect a lot out of that. Because God's equipped you and gifted you to do that. So I want you to do hard things, and I'm going to expect hard things out of you. Not because I'm being hard, not because I want to be hard, but because I want you to excel, as in to reach for your God-given best in whatever you do. Now listen, I know that the cell phone policy was popular with your parents and probably not popular with you. I understand that. I've got probably 25, 30 parents write to me, thank you so much for removing phones from the school. I didn't get one parent complain and said, I wish my kids could keep their phone. Now, some might think that. I understand. But the reason we went that route is not because we're going to make it just a little bit harder on them. We went that route because we want to remove something that can keep you from pouring into what you're doing here and excelling in what you're doing here. My daughters, whenever social media is a killer, meaning social media is a great source of depression and discouragement because everybody compares each other. When my girls were young teenagers, one thing we talked about, how can I help them control social media? Well, before they went upstairs to bed, they'd leave their phones on the counter so they weren't scrolling at night. Because I'd go up there, I thought everybody's in bed, I see this little glow underneath the cover, and they're still scrolling something. You been there? I talked to my girls, and I said, listen, this is just not healthy. You guys aren't getting the sleep you need. You're getting discouraged because everybody on social media is doing so much better than you are, or you think they are. And so let's leave the phones on the counter, and when you go to bed in the evening, you go upstairs, leave the phone down here. You know how much they were thankful for that? They couldn't do it themselves because, the phone's there. But for me to say, hey, ladies, I love you enough to know this is not healthy for you. Let's put this thing to the side. Phones are a good thing in many ways. But we pull that out, not because we decide we just want to make it a little bit hard on you, but because we want you to give your fullest to what you're doing here. And your fullest is not just academically studying hard. It's also giving your fullest one to another. Because what I observed last year, when I walk into classrooms while you're waiting for class to start, what's everybody doing? Everybody's gazing at their phones. Lunchtime, what's everybody doing? Gazing at their phones. And what every school, the reason why all the schools in the state of Virginia, everybody else is pulling back on phones, are realizing is destroying the social fabric of a school. So I know you're used to having it and you like having it, but we're doing it so that when you're here, put that away, focus on your academics, focus on each other, give your fullest what you're doing here, and grab that phone at the end of the day and get caught up on all the things that you missed. So let me give you a biblical admonition to the young. And I'm just going to read a few passages, and we'll go to one text if we have time in that. But 1 Corinthians 13. Now don't turn here, because I'm going to read several passages. 1 Corinthians 13:11 says this. It says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I gave up childish things. You notice he doesn't say when I was a child, I became a teen. I became this hybrid child, man, adult. He says I was a child, but when I was no longer a child, I became an adult. And when I was an adult, what happened? Well, three things changed when I became a young man, a young adult. As a young adult, here's what I expect out of you, because this is the transition from being a child. One, I no longer talk like a child. Not just increasing your vocabulary, which I hope some of it does increase, but how you talk to each other. Maturity, respect, poise. You don't just say the first thing that comes through your mind. Being an adult is not just saying what you think every time. Boy, we get ourselves in a lot of trouble if I spoke what I thought all the time, right? As an adult, when I was a child, I changed these things, right? When I used to speak like a child, now I no longer speak like a child. I speak like an adult. He says, I thought like a child, and I reasoned like a child. So let me tell you, as you walk into this high school, it is time, if you have not done so already, it is time for you to no longer be a child and no longer do childish things. You're a young adult. Be responsible with the way you communicate, the way you talk. You think differently. It's not all about you. You think about others. You understand the need for structure. So your thought process is changing. And it needs to change, and it can change. And so you talk differently, you think differently, you reason differently. He says, when I became a young adult, I gave up childish ways. He says in the next chapter, in the same letter, he says, brothers, stop thinking like children, but in your thinking, be adults. This is Paul rebuking the church. He says, you're acting like children. Stop thinking. You're no longer a child. He's talking about their spiritual immaturity and their need to grow in spiritual maturity. He says kind of some of the same things in 1 Timothy 4. And you know this verse. He says, when he talks about telling Timothy, don't let anyone look down upon you because you're young, but be an example. He's telling Timothy as a young person, as a young man, you can be an example for others to follow. I expect you to be the example. Set the pace. Be an example for others in your classroom. Be an example for others in school. I don't care if you're a 7th grader or if you're a 12th grader. Of course, you expect a little bit more out of the older kids because you're a little bit wiser. You're a little bit more knowledgeable. And that should hopefully even trickle down. Romans 12 tells us not to be conformed, right, any longer in our way of thinking. Don't be conformed. That's what I mean by rebelling. Rebel against low expectation. Rebel against being a child and having others expecting you to be a child. Do hard things. Do right things. Think as young adults. In those three stories I gave you earlier of George, the surveyor, you had David the sailor, you had Claire the nurse. Some of you might know some of these stories. George the surveyor at 17, 3 years went on surveying the land, landing new uncharted territory. He went on to be a high-ranking soldier in the state militia. By 23, he was the commander of the entire Virginia militia. Later, he became commander-in-chief of the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War and eventually became George Washington, our first president. As a young man, though, what was he? He did things that today would seem inconceivable. David, this young sailor, went on to be the first U.S. Navy's first admiral. He was a hero during the Civil War. David Farragut became famous for his bravery at the Battle of Mobile Bay. And then Clara, our nurse, she went on to be remember, she was at 14 years old nursing all these sick people through the epidemic that was going through the country. And then later at 17 became a school teacher. She went on to be the founder of the American Red Cross. These young lives and these young ages were formative years for them as teenagers. So let me just encourage you in two ways with the time we have. One, rebel against low expectations. I want teachers to have high expectations of you, but you need to have high expectations of yourself, to excel and do your God-given best in whatever task is given to you, and to act like the young adults that you are, and how you interact with each other, and how you engage each other, and how you engage the work that's given to you. The last one, I want to say just these 2 points. I got about 3 minutes. I want you to rebel against nominal Christianity. Now, what does it mean to be nominal Christian? A nominal Christian is someone who is a Christian in name only. That's a nominal Christian. And it's difficult because there's probably nothing more tragic than someone that's a Christian in name only, which means he doesn't think like a believer, he doesn't act like a believer, he doesn't talk like a believer, but he calls himself a believer. And be honest, that's one of the greatest challenges you're going to have here in this school, where there's expectations around you as in a Christian school, as Christian students. The reality is, of course, a number of you don't know the Lord. And so I trust that if you're not a believer, I trust that this coming year you'll become one. When the Philippian jailer is going to ask Paul, what do I do to be saved? He says, believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. I trust that this year, if you're not a believer and you don't know the Lord, that you'll come to believe in Christ. You'll believe that you're a sinner, born in sin. You'll believe that the wages of sin is death. You'll believe that on the cross, the Lord took that penalty of death upon him, and that he saved you. As you confess and repent and come to him, I trust if you're not a believer that you'll become that this coming year. I trust that if you're just a nominal believer, that you'll become fully dedicated believer this coming year as well. I'm just going to give you one passage. We don't have time to read it because we're running out of time, but Matthew 8:34 encourages someone to be fully committed and fully dedicated to their walk in the Lord. He says, whoever loses his life for my sake. Well, first of all, a little bit before, he says, for whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world if he loses his soul? If the bell rings, I'm going to close in prayer, so don't take up and run off until I get a chance to close in prayer. Two things. Rebelution. Rebelution. Rebel against low expectations that society places on you, that people around you place on you. Allow teachers to exhort you to do more. Allow teachers to encourage you to excel, to do to your fullest what you're capable of doing. Allow us as a school to encourage you in that way, because as I see you, you're not a child. We're going to put away childish things, childish language, childish words, and we're going to be young adults, and we're going to put away these childish things, and we're going to do hard things. But God's equipped you to do that. God's enabled you to do that. So let's not settle for anything less as we commit our ways into the Lord. And throughout this coming year, if you're not a believer, my prayer is that you become a believer. If you're just walking the walk and you're say you're a believer, but you're not living the life of one, I trust that you come to understand the need to be much more than that. And I trust that in this school, you're in the type of environment that will allow you to do that. So I'm going to close with a word of prayer, praying that you guys have a wonderful year, praying that you would have, not because it's easy, not because we took a lot of shortcuts. I know today with AI and so many other things, there's so many ways of taking shortcuts. Don't take those shortcuts. You're shortcutting yourself, no one else. So let's really let's resist that childish things. Father, we thank you for this first chapel. I thank you for the student body every year. I know it's a little bit different students, and new ones moving up to the high school realm, and new students that have arrived here. Lord, I pray that we may not settle for low expectations, that these students may not settle for low expectations. The entire society around them expects so little out of them. But Lord, you want them to put away childish things and walk in a way that is glorifying and honoring to you, that we would excel in everything that we set ourselves out to do, not to achieve perfection, but to achieve, Lord, to put all we have and to do in our utmost best for you and for your glory. Bless this remainder of this day. In your name we pray. Amen.